I came home from my father's funeral with my heart pounding from grief, but also carrying a hope I could barely contain. My father had left me 3 shopping centers and a vineyard estate. I was ready to tell my daughter everything was about to change for both of us. But as I reached for the doorknob, I heard her voice, calm, cold. "If he won't sign the papers, we'll have him committed to a psychiatric facility." My hand frozen. My daughter, my only child, wasn't planning our future. She was planning my destruction. And in that moment, I had to make a choice, even if that choice would shatter everything. I'm so grateful you're here. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing this story reaches people everywhere. Also, a quick note. This narrative blends fictionalized elements with lessons drawn from life experience crafted for educational and reflective purposes. Any similarities to specific names or locations are entirely unintentional, but the wisdom I'm sharing. That's something I hope stays with you long after this video ends. I never thought my father's funeral would be the day everything changed. Not because of grief, we'd been strangers for 15 years, but because of what came after. The will, the inheritance, and the conversation I was never supposed to hear. The garage apartment was cold that morning. I woke before dawn, staring at the bare rafters above the narrow cot Brielle had set up for me when I moved in 3 months ago. The space smelled of motor oil and dust, a far cry from the home Lillian and I had shared for 40 years. But after she died, after the medical bills and the funeral costs, I'd sold the house just to stay afloat. My daughter had offered me this place, a gesture I'd mistaken for kindness. I dressed slowly, pulling on the same black suit I'd worn to Lillian's service 6 months earlier. The fabric hung looser now. I hadn't been eating much. Brielle cooked for Jason, not for me. Most nights I heated canned soup on the hot plate tucked in the corner. She wasn't coming to the funeral. Neither was Jason. Too far, she'd said. Work commitments. Besides, she'd never been close to Grandpa Thomas. None of us had been, not for a long time. I couldn't blame her for that. The estrangement had started with me. The drive to the cemetery took 2 hours. I followed the winding roads through the Colorado foothills, past golden aspens and rocky outcroppings, until I reached the small chapel near the vineyard Thomas had bought years ago. I'd never visited it. Never even knew it existed until the funeral director mentioned the location. The service was small, 6 people counting me. Andrew Sterling, my father's attorney, stood near the back in a charcoal overcoat. Martin Cooper, the vineyard manager, nodded solemnly from the front row. 3 others I didn't recognize, neighbors perhaps, or business associates. The wind cut across the open grave, sharp and unforgiving, carrying the scent of pine and earth. The pastor spoke briefly about Thomas Hollis, 89 years, a man of quiet determination, survived by 1 son. I didn't cry. I'd spent 15 years learning not to feel anything when I thought of my father. But standing there, watching the casket lower into the ground, I felt the weight of all those wasted years pressing against my chest. Andrew approached me as the small crowd dispersed. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of steady presence that made you believe him when he said everything would be fine. "I'm Edward," he said quietly. "We need to talk. Your father's will. Can you come to my office?" I nodded. What else could I do? An hour later, I sat across from Andrew in his law office, a modest building overlooking the valley. He slid a folder across the desk, thick with documents, and I felt my stomach tighten. "Thomas left everything to you," Andrew said. I blinked. Everything. He opened the folder, and I watched numb as he walked me through the details. 3 shopping centers, Riverside Plaza, Meadowbrook Commons, Highway 70 Marketplace, worth a combined $16.5 million. Hollis Ridge Vineyard, 15 acres of working land, with a main house and guest cottage valued at $5.5 million. And then there was the patent, the Hollis reinforcement system, some kind of structural engineering innovation my father had developed decades ago. It still generated $84,000 a year in licensing fees. Total estate value, Andrew said, his voice calm but deliberate, is approximately $25 million. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk, my hands trembling. That can't be right, I whispered. My father, he lived modestly, I thought. He built it for you, Andrew said. He never touched the principal. He lived off Social Security and a small pension. Everything else he reinvested. He wanted you to have security. I couldn't speak. $25 million. My father, the man I'd barely spoken to in 15 years. The man I'd resented for his silence, his distance, had spent all that time building something for me. I thought of Lillian. How she'd worried in those final months, afraid I'd have nothing after she was gone. How she'd made me promise to ask Brielle for help if I needed it. She would have loved the vineyard, the rolling hills, the quiet. And then I thought of Brielle, my daughter. Living paycheck to paycheck, always stressed about the mortgage, about Jason's gambling debts. I could help her now. I could fix everything. I need to tell my daughter, I said, my voice cracking. This changes everything. We're going to be okay. Andrew handed me a set of keys and a sealed envelope. Be careful who you tell Edward. Money has a way of changing people. I dismissed the warning with a wave. She's my daughter. She'll be thrilled. The drive home felt shorter than it should have. My mind raced with plans. I'd pay off Brielle's mortgage. Help with Jason's debts. Maybe we could all take a trip somewhere Lillian had always wanted to go. The vineyard could wait. This was about family. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the front lawn. The house glowed warm with interior lights. I could hear voices inside, Brielle's laugh, Jason's low murmur. They sounded relaxed. Happy. I climbed out of the car, my heart pounding with anticipation. I wanted to see her face when I told her. Wanted to watch relief wash over her the way it had washed over me in Andrew's office. I walked up the front steps, reaching for the doorknob. But before my hand touched the handle, I heard Brielle's voice, clear, sharp, unmistakable through the cracked living room window. He just got back from the funeral. He'll be vulnerable, grieving. This is our chance. I froze. Jason's voice followed, uncertain. Chance for what? And then Brielle said the words that would destroy everything. To get him into Golden Meadows. My hand hovered an inch from the doorknob. I didn't move. Couldn't. The warmth from inside the house radiated through the cracked window, but all I felt was ice spreading through my veins with terrifying speed. Brielle's voice carried clearly across the quiet evening air, sharp and deliberate. We need to move fast. He doesn't know what Thomas left him, probably some small inheritance, a house, maybe life insurance. 100,000, 200 tops. I pulled my hand back slowly, carefully. My breath fogged against the glass. Jason's voice followed, quieter, uncertain. Brielle, we don't even know if there's anything substantial. What if Thomas left him nothing? Then we're completely screwed. Brielle snapped harshly. The second mortgage is due November 1st. We're 2 months behind on the first. Marcus is calling every day about the 310. If Dad doesn't sign over whatever Thomas left, we lose everything. 310, $310,000. I pressed closer to the window, hidden by the shadow of the eaves. The kitchen light framed them both, Brielle pacing restlessly, Jason sitting at the table with his head in his hands. What do you want me to do? Jason asked helplessly. I want you to help me. Brielle stopped pacing and leaned against the counter. Dr. Hammond said he can have Dad evaluated. If we can prove he's not capable of managing his affairs, we petition for guardianship. Then we control everything, the inheritance, the assets, all of it. Guardianship. Jason's voice cracked audibly. Brielle, that's survival, she interrupted coldly. We're drowning, Jason. The casinos aren't going to wait. Marcus isn't going to wait. If we don't act now, we lose the house. We lose everything. Silence stretched between them. I held my breath. "What about your dad?" Jason finally said. "What happens to him?" Brielle's answer came cold and measured. "Golden Meadows has a unit. Psychiatric evaluation, temporary placement. Once we have guardianship, we move him somewhere long-term. He'll be taken care of. Golden Meadows, a psychiatric facility 30 miles outside Denver." My chest tightened painfully. My daughter, my only child, was planning to lock me away. "I don't know if I can do this," Jason whispered. "You don't have a choice." Brielle's voice hardened. "We're in this together. If we go down together." I stepped back from the window. My legs felt unsteady. For a moment I thought I might collapse right there on the porch, but I forced myself to breathe slow, controlled, deliberate. $25 million? She thought I had 100,000, maybe 2. She had no idea. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked 3 blocks to the public library. It was open until 9 on Tuesdays, and I needed somewhere quiet to think, somewhere Brielle and Jason wouldn't find me. The reading room was nearly empty. I sat in a corner chair beneath a dim lamp and stared at the stack of documents Andrew had given me that afternoon. The will, the trust paperwork, the deeds, $25 million. 3 shopping centers valued at over $16 million. A vineyard worth $5.5. Patent rights generating passive income. An irrevocable trust waiting to be funded. Thomas had built an empire in silence, and he'd left it all to me. And Brielle wanted to steal it. I thought about the last 6 months, Lillian's death in April, selling the house in July, moving into Brielle's garage apartment, because I had nowhere else to go. I thought about the quiet dinners, the small kindnesses, the way Brielle had insisted I stay as long as I needed. It had all been a carefully constructed lie. She hadn't taken me in out of love. She'd taken me in because she needed something from me. And now that Thomas was dead, she thought she'd found it. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. 2 choices. I could walk back into that house, tell Brielle the truth, and watch her crumble under the weight of what she'd almost done. I could confront her, force her to confess, demand an apology. Or I could stay silent. Let her think I was helpless. Let her believe I had no idea what she was planning. And while she plotted, I could prepare. Andrew's words echoed in my mind. "Be careful who you tell. Money changes people." I opened my eyes and looked down at the documents in my lap. Brielle had changed long before she knew about the money. The casinos had changed her. The debt had changed her. Desperation had turned my daughter into someone I didn't recognize. But I wasn't desperate. I had time. I had resources. And I had Andrew. I folded the documents carefully and slipped them back into the envelope. Then I stood, walked to the library's front desk, and asked the librarian if I could use one of the computers. "Of course," she said with a kind smile. "Take your time." I sat down and opened a browser. Typed how to gather evidence of elder abuse. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. I woke early in the small apartment and dressed slowly, khaki pants, a faded flannel shirt, the same clothes I'd worn for the past 3 months. I wanted to look tired, worn down, grateful. I walked into the main house through the side door just after 8. Brielle and Jason were already in the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the air. "Morning, Dad," Brielle said brightly. Too brightly. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," I said quietly. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the mug, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping my voice steady. Jason glanced at me, then looked away quickly. "So," Brielle said, sliding into the chair across from me, "how did it go yesterday, the funeral?" I nodded slowly. It was quiet. Not many people. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there," she said. Her voice was soft, concerned. "I know you and Thomas had your differences, but still, it must have been hard." I looked down at my coffee. Andrew was there, Thomas's lawyer. Brielle's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of interest in her eyes. "Oh, did he say anything?" "He said Thomas left me some things." I kept my voice flat, emotionless. "A house, I think. Maybe some investments. He said we'd go over the details next week." "Yeah, that's good, Dad." Brielle reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thomas cared about you. I'm sure he wanted to take care of you." I let her hold my hand for a moment, then gently pulled away. "I don't know what I'll do with it. I don't need much." "Well," Brielle said carefully, "if you need help managing anything, paperwork, finances, whatever, Jason and I are here. You know that, right?" I nodded. "I know." Jason stood abruptly and walked to the sink. He kept his back to us. I spent the rest of the morning in the garage apartment cleaning and organizing. I moved slowly, deliberately, making sure Brielle could see me through the window if she looked. I wanted her to think I was compliant, harmless, but while I worked, my mind raced. Golden Meadows, Dr. Hammond, guardianship. She had a plan, and I needed to document every step of it. Tomorrow I would start gathering evidence, and Brielle would never see it coming. The smartphone was 8 years old with a cracked screen, but it still worked. I'd kept it after upgrading tucked in my duffel bag. That first night after Brielle and Jason went to bed, I plugged it into the single outlet near my cot and watched the battery icon slowly fill. By morning I had a plan. The public library opened at 9. I drove there after Brielle left for work, telling her I needed groceries, another harmless errand for the helpless old man. Instead, I spent 2 hours at a desktop computer watching tutorials on downloading voice-activated recording apps, positioning a phone for optimal audio, and transferring files to cloud storage where they couldn't be erased. I was 68, a retired structural engineer who'd spent 40 years with blueprints and load calculations. Learning new technology felt awkward and clumsy, but desperation is a hell of a teacher. By noon, I had what I needed. The first recording happened almost by accident. I'd left my jacket draped over a chair in the hallway, the phone tucked in the inner pocket with the app running. Brielle and Jason walked past me into the living room, voices low but audible through thin walls. I stayed in the kitchen washing dishes, slowly listening. "Wow, we need at least 200,000 by month's end." Brielle said, her voice tight and strained. "The casino isn't going to wait. Marcus already called twice this week." "I told you to stop," Jason snapped. "You promised after the last time. Don't lecture me. We're past that. Once we get his properties, we're set. Dr. Hammond's doing the evaluation Monday." "You mean that place, Golden Meadows?" "It's a psychiatric facility," Brielle said flatly. "Perfectly legal if he's deemed mentally unfit. Hammond owes me. He'll sign whatever I need." I heard footsteps moving toward the hallway. I grabbed my jacket and retreated to the garage before they saw me. Later, alone in the dark, I listened to the recording 3 times. Each playback twisted the knife deeper. She'd said it so casually, psychiatric facility, mentally unfit, as if I were a problem to solve, not a person. 2 days later, I left the phone on the kitchen counter while taking out trash. When I returned, Brielle was on a call back to me, voice sharp and businesslike. "Yes, by Wednesday. I'll have the papers ready. He won't know what he's signing. Just need him distracted long enough to..." She turned, saw me in the doorway. Her expression shifted instantly, hard edges smoothing into a smile. "I'll call you back." Then to me, "Dad, you startled me. I thought you were outside." "You just came back in," I said mildly. "Forgot my gloves?" She watched me retrieve the phone from the counter, her gaze sharp. But I moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who didn't understand what he'd interrupted. The third recording came early Sunday morning. I pretended to sleep while Brielle and Jason talked just outside the garage door, thinking I couldn't hear them. "Dr. Hammond's coming Monday at 10, Brielle said. "Once I have the paperwork, Golden Meadows can take him within 48 hours. It's a psychiatric hold. Once he's declared unfit, they keep him there." "You already forged his signature on the second mortgage," Jason said quietly. "Got 75,000. The gambling debt's 310. You're still short. Ha, which is why we sell whatever he inherited. Pocket the cash. Pay Marcus, start over. What about your conscience? Brielle laughed, bitter and sharp. Conscience doesn't pay bills, Jason. You're in this with me. Don't pretend you're not. I lay there long after they left, staring at the ceiling phone clutched in my hand. By Sunday afternoon, I had 3 recordings, but I needed more than audio files. I needed a witness, someone outside this house, someone Brielle couldn't control. Dorothy Thompson had been our neighbor for 20 years, close with Lillian. After the funeral, she'd called to check on me. I told her I was staying with Brielle temporarily. She brought a casserole that afternoon. I watched through the garage window as she knocked on the front door. Brielle answered, blocking the doorway. Mrs. Thompson, how kind. Dad's resting, though. Not feeling well today. Oh, I'm sorry. Could I just say hello? It'll only take a moment. I'd rather not disturb him. But I'll make sure he gets this. Thank you. The door closed firmly. Dorothy stood on the porch for a long moment, then walked slowly back. She paused at the lawn's edge, glancing toward the garage. From her angle, she could see through the small window, the cot-thin blanket, bare concrete floor. She stood there nearly a minute, her expression shifting from confusion to something darker. That evening, my phone buzzed. Dorothy's name appeared. Toward it's Dorothy. Are you all right? Brielle wouldn't let me see you today. I stepped outside into the cold October air and spoke quietly. I'm fine, Dorothy, just adjusting. You don't sound fine. Her voice was gentle but firm. If something's wrong, I appreciate that more than you know, I said carefully. But I'm managing. There was a pause. If you need anything, Edward, anything at all, you call me. Day or night. After I hung up, I saw her standing at her kitchen window looking toward the garage. She didn't wave. She just watched. If this went to court, Dorothy Thompson would remember this moment. The locked door, the cold room, the daughter who wouldn't let a family friend through. That night, I reviewed everything. 3 recordings with dates, times, direct quotes. Dr. Hammond's name, the psychiatric facility, the forged mortgage, the gambling debt, and an external witness who'd seen enough to raise questions. It was almost enough, but not quite. I needed legal advice, someone who could tell me how to use this evidence without destroying myself. Someone I could trust. I thought of Andrew Sterling, my father's attorney, who'd handed me $25 million and warned me to be careful who I told. He'd been right. At 11 that night, I dialed his personal number. The phone rang twice before he answered, voice groggy. Andrew Sterling. It's Edward Hollis, I said quietly. I need your help, and I need it before tomorrow morning. There was a pause. Then his voice sharpened, alert. Tell me everything. I told him everything. Sitting in the dark garage with the phone pressed to my ear, I walked Andrew through every detail, the overheard conversation, the recordings, Mrs. Thompson's visit, Brielle's plan to have me declared mentally unfit and locked in a psychiatric facility. When I finished, the silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then Andrew's voice came through, low and controlled, but I could hear the anger beneath it. Edward, what you're describing is elder abuse, financial fraud, conspiracy to commit involuntary psychiatric commitment. If they succeed, getting you out of Golden Meadows could take months, maybe longer. We need to act fast, but we also need to be smart. What do you mean? I asked. If you confront them now, they'll deny everything. Destroy evidence. Claim you're confused, paranoid, exactly what they're already planning to say. We need irrefutable proof, and we need to secure your assets before they can touch them. I exhaled slowly. Tell me what to do. Andrew was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his voice shifted, calm, methodical, the voice of a man building a case. Here's how this works. Starting tomorrow, Tuesday, we move on multiple fronts. First, we liquidate one of the shopping centers. Fast. I've had a consortium interested in Riverside Plaza for 9 months. They've been waiting for you to decide. I'll contact them tomorrow morning. Tell them you're ready to sell. Price it at 6.5 million, slightly below market value, to guarantee a quick close. We can have papers signed by Thursday. The Thursday, I said. That's 3 days. Which is why we need to move now. The moment we have the funds, we set up an irrevocable trust. I'll be the trustee, not you. That way, even if Brielle somehow gets guardianship, she can't access it. The beneficiary is you for your lifetime, then it goes to charity. 6.5 million locked away where she can't touch it. I felt something loosen in my chest. She'd have no claim, none. Irrevocable means permanent. Once it's signed, it's untouchable. What about the rest? I asked. The vineyard, the other properties, the patents. Those stay in your name for now. But we document everything, transfer titles into LLCs if needed, create legal barriers. If this goes to court, we'll have a paper trail showing you were of sound mind and acting deliberately. I thought of Brielle's plan. Dr. Hammond, Golden Meadows, the forged signature. What about the forgery? I asked. The second mortgage she took out. Andrew's voice hardened. That's leverage. I'll contact the bank tomorrow, request records. If she forged your signature, that's fraud, felony level. And if the mortgage is on property you have any legal claim to, we can challenge it. Better yet, we can buy the debt from the bank. Buy the debt. If they're in default, and it sounds like they are, the bank will want to offload it. We offer to pay off both mortgages, buy the debt ourselves. Then you become the lender. If they can't pay you, control the foreclosure timeline. I sat in the dark, processing. You're saying I could take the house. If it comes to that, yes. But more importantly, it removes their financial motive. They can't sell your inheritance if they don't control the asset. What about Dr. Hammond? I asked. And Golden Meadows? I'll have my investigator look into both. If Hammond's being paid off or has a compromised relationship with your daughter, that's malpractice. As for Golden Meadows, I'll confirm it's a locked psychiatric facility and document their intake procedures. If they try to admit you without proper cause, we'll have grounds for a lawsuit. When do we confront them? I asked. Andrew paused. We don't. Not yet. Let them think they're winning. Let Dr. Hammond come Wednesday. Let them believe you're confused, vulnerable, easy to manipulate. We record everything. And then when we have all the evidence we need, we strike. How long? My voice came out hoarse. 3 more days. Wednesday, Hammond does his evaluation. Thursday, the trust is finalized. Friday, we move. 3 more days. 3 more days of playing weak, of pretending I didn't know. Can you do that? Andrew asked gently. I thought of Lillian. How she'd endured 6 months of pain, never once complaining, always thinking of me first. 3 days was nothing. Yes, I said. I can do that. Says good. I'll call you tomorrow afternoon with updates. In the meantime, play your part. Don't let them see anything's changed. Andrew, I said quietly, thank you. Lillian always said you were a good man. Your father was a good man too, Edward. He built all of this for you. I won't let them take it. After we hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. For the first time in 5 days, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, Brielle knocked on the garage door just after 8. I opened it slowly, blinking against the light like a man who'd barely slept. Morning, Dad, she said brightly. I wanted to remind you Dr. Hammond's coming tomorrow at 10. Just a routine checkup. Make sure you're feeling okay. I nodded slowly, letting confusion flicker across my face. Dr. Hammond. The doctor I told you about. Remember, he's going to ask you a few questions, check your memory. Nothing to worry about. Oh, I said softly. All right. She smiled, warm, reassuring, false. I'll be there with you the whole time. Thank you, sweetheart. She left satisfied. I watched her walk back to the house, her shoulders relaxed, confident. She had no idea. By Thursday evening, Andrew had moved faster than I thought possible. Riverside Plaza sold to the consortium for $6.5 million. The irrevocable trust signed and notarized funds transferred Andrew Sterling named trustee. The bank records subpoenaed showing Brielle's forged signature on a $75,000 mortgage. The investigators' preliminary report on Dr. Hammond 3 malpractice complaints, 2 settled out of court. And Golden Meadows confirmed a locked psychiatric facility specializing in involuntary holds. Andrew called just before midnight. "It's done," he said. "The trap is set. Now we let her walk into it." I hung up and lay back on the cot, staring at the rafters. Somewhere in the house, Brielle was sleeping soundly, dreaming of money she'd never see. And in 3 days, she'd learn the cost of trying to bury me alive. Andrew called early Tuesday morning before Brielle left for work. I took the phone outside, standing in the October cold, watching my breath mist in the air. "The consortium agreed," he said without preamble. $6.5 million for Riverside Plaza, cash. They want to close by Thursday. I leaned against the garage wall, relief flooding through me. "That fast? They've been waiting since January. Your father turned them down twice, said he wanted you to make the decision. They already have due diligence from May, so we're just updating legal docs. I told them you need speed, not negotiations. They understood. What's the catch? Schulna. They want a $20,000 reduction to cover expedited processing. I recommend taking it. $6.48 million is more than fair market value, and we close in 3 days. I didn't hesitate. Do it. By Wednesday afternoon, the papers were ready. I met Andrew at his office, signing document after document, while he explained each one in careful detail. Sale agreement, title transfer, wire instructions. Every page felt like another brick in the wall I was building between Brielle and my father's legacy. The wire transfer came through Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. $6,480,000. Temporary hold in Andrew's firm account, waiting for the next step. At 6 that evening, I signed the trust. Andrew had drafted it himself, 12 pages of legal language that boiled down to one simple principle: irrevocable meant untouchable. The Lillian Hollis Irrevocable Trust, named for the woman who'd spent 40 years beside me, who'd never know her name, would protect me when I needed it most. Andrew Sterling, trustee. Edward Hollis, beneficiary for life. Upon death, remainder to charity. Assets, $6.48 million, with provisions to add more. Protected from creditors, legal claims, and most importantly, guardianship control. Once you sign this, Andrew said quietly, it's permanent. Even I can't undo it without court approval. Are you sure? I thought of Brielle's voice through the window. Golden Meadows. Locked doors. Out of our way. I'm sure. I signed. Andrew notarized. And for the first time in 9 days, I felt control returning. While I'd been playing the helpless father, Andrew's investigator had been busy. The report landed on my phone Thursday night, a 30-page PDF. I read by the dim light of my phone screen. Every page felt like a punch to the chest. Brielle's gambling debt, $310,000. 2 casinos, 1 in Colorado, 1 in Nevada. 18 months of accumulation, starting in April of last year, 6 months before Lillian died. She'd borrowed from associates, the kind of people who didn't take no for an answer. The deadline, October 31st. 1 week away. The second mortgage, $75,000, taken out just 1 month ago on the house Lillian had left me in her will. The signature on the loan documents was mine, except it wasn't. A handwriting expert had confirmed the forgery in under 24 hours. The small local bank hadn't bothered to verify carefully. They'd just processed the loan and handed Brielle the money. She was already 2 months behind on the original mortgage, $180,000 she and Jason had taken out in 2022. The clock was ticking on that too. Dr. Gregory Hammond, licensed psychiatrist, met Brielle at a wellness retreat in August. 3 prior malpractice complaints, 2 settled quietly out of court. Brielle had promised him $50,000 to evaluate me, declare me lacking capacity, and recommend psychiatric placement. He needed the money. His own gambling debts were piling up. If he got caught, he'd lose his license. But desperation made people reckless. And then there was Marcus Reed. I stared at his name on the screen, trying to place it. Brielle had never mentioned him. But according to the investigator, Marcus was an old boyfriend from college 20 years ago who'd reconnected with her in June, 2 months after Lillian died. Social media, sympathetic messages, subtle encouragement to take what she deserved. Marcus had a record, 2 fraud convictions in the 90s. The investigator suspected he was planning to scam Brielle once she got the money, convince her to invest, then disappear. But the investigator couldn't locate him. The social media profiles were fake, the phone numbers disconnected. Marcus Reed was a ghost. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes. My daughter wasn't just desperate. She was being manipulated by a con artist she didn't even realize was using her. It didn't make what she'd done forgivable, but it made it sadder. Andrew had one more move to make. Thursday afternoon, while I was signing the trust, he contacted the bank holding both mortgages on the house. The conversation was short. The bank had already flagged the second mortgage internally. Someone in their compliance department had noticed the signature discrepancy and started a review. They were facing potential liability for not verifying properly. Andrew offered a solution: pay both mortgages in full. $255,000. Edward Hollis becomes the lien holder. The bank avoids foreclosure proceedings and a lawsuit. The bank agreed within the hour. Andrew called me that night to explain. The bank had already initiated an internal review due to suspected forgery, which expedited the transfer. By law, they had 48 hours to complete the paperwork. I made sure they used every minute efficiently. As of Saturday at 5 p.m., you'll own the debt. If Brielle defaults, you control the foreclosure timeline. So if she can't pay, I said slowly, I can take the house. If it comes to that, yes. But more importantly, she loses her leverage. She can't sell an asset you control, and she can't use your inheritance to pay off a debt you own. I sat in the dark garage, the phone warm against my ear, and felt the pieces locking into place. By Thursday night, the trap was nearly set. The trust was signed. The mortgage debt would transfer by Saturday. The investigator's report documented everything: fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Dr. Hammond's evaluation had been postponed to Monday. Andrew, citing a cold I didn't have. Brielle had been frustrated, but hadn't questioned it. She thought I was too broken to be a threat. She had no idea. I lay on the cot that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. Andrew had one more meeting scheduled, something he said I needed to do in person. He wouldn't explain over the phone. Friday morning, he'd said. Tell Brielle you have errands. She won't question it. I texted him just before midnight. Ready. His response came immediately. See you at 9. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Somewhere in the house, Brielle was sleeping soundly, counting down the days until Dr. Hammond declared me unfit. She thought she had everything figured out, but Friday morning I was going to meet someone who would reveal the final piece of my father's legacy and give me one more reason to see this through to the end. Had a medical appointment, routine blood work, nothing urgent. She'd barely looked up from her phone when I mentioned it, too distracted by whatever schemes were churning through her mind. She didn't know I'd registered as an Uber driver 2 weeks after Lillian died, desperate for extra money to cover funeral expenses. I'd only worked 3 shifts before moving into the garage, but the account was still active. And today, I needed an excuse to disappear. My car, a 15-year-old Toyota Camry that had seen better days, sat in a public garage 5 blocks away. Brielle thought I'd sold it months ago. I'd let her believe that, just like I'd let her believe so many other things. The October morning was cold, and clear, the kind of day Lillian used to love. I drove through empty streets toward the wealthier part of town, where retirement communities had names like estates and gardens instead of facilities or homes. The app pinged at 7:30 with a pickup request: Pinewood Estates to downtown. 30-minute ride. Good fare. The passenger was waiting outside when I pulled up, an elderly man in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie, leaning on a cane but standing straight. 80 if he was a day, but sharp-eyed and alert. He slid into the back seat with practiced ease. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It is, sir. Heading to work. Board meeting. Semi-retired, but they still need me from time to time." He smiled. Keeps the mind sharp. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the early light slanting through the trees. Then I noticed him leaning forward, studying the driver profile displayed on the app. "I'm Edward Hollis," he said slowly. "Is that you?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, surprised. "Yes, sir. Do we know each other?" "Not directly, but I knew your father, Thomas Hollis." My hands tightened on the wheel. I checked the mirrors, signaled, and pulled over into a quiet side street. When the car was safely stopped, I turned to face him. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "You knew my father." "I did. And you look just like him, same eyes, same way of holding your shoulders. I thought it might be you when I saw the name, but I wasn't certain until now." He extended a hand. "Robert Fleming." I shook it, my mind racing. "How did you know him?" Robert settled back in his seat, as if he had all the time in the world. 40 years ago, 1984, I owned a small engineering firm, Fleming and Associates, structural consulting, mostly commercial projects. I was young, ambitious, and drowning in debt. $200,000 owed to creditors, no bank would touch me. I was weeks away from bankruptcy. He paused, looking out the window at the quiet residential street. "Your father and I had worked together on a project just once, briefly. Barely knew the man. But one day he showed up at my office and offered me $50,000 for 10% equity in my company. No loans, no interest, just belief that I'd figure it out." I stared at him. "He gave you $50,000. He invested it. There's a difference. He believed in the work, not just the money. And he was right. That investment saved my company. 10 years later, I bought back the equity, offered him $150,000 fair market value at the time. He refused." "Refused?" Robert smiled. "Said he didn't need the cash. Asked for a small percentage of any patents we developed together instead. We'd been collaborating on a structural reinforcement system, something that could reduce material costs in high-rise construction. Your father's engineering background made him invaluable. When we finalized the patent in the late 90s, he took 30% of the licensing revenue." My chest felt tight. "The Hollis reinforcement system. That's the one. Still generates about $280,000 a year in licensing fees. Thomas's share, your share now, is roughly $84,000 annually. Over 20 years, that's nearly $1.7 million. Current value of his stake, if you sold it outright, is probably closer to $2.8 million. I couldn't speak. My father, the distant, silent man I'd resented for 15 years, had built this. Not for himself. For me. I didn't know," I said finally. "My father and we were estranged. I hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. Robert's expression softened. "I know. He mentioned it once, years ago. It weighed on him heavily. He talked about you often wondered how you were, what you were doing, whether you were happy. But he never reached out. Why not? Pride. Fear of rejection. The same reasons any of us make the mistakes we do." Robert leaned forward slightly. "But he left you everything, didn't he? I heard from Martin Cooper at the vineyard. You know Martin. Small world. We're both on the same wine association board." He smiled. "Thomas loved that vineyard. Told me once it reminded him of simpler times when success was measured in good soil and patient work, not dollars and deals. I looked down at my hands, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left. There's something else you should know, Robert said gently. We're developing a new system, an improvement on the original patent. If you stay involved, the licensing revenue could double within 5 years. Your father built something that will outlast all of us, and he built it for you. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They came quietly, without sound, just wetness on my face that I wiped away with the back of my hand. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me buy you lunch next week. I'd like to tell you more about your father, the man I knew. The man who saved my company and never asked for anything in return except a chance to leave something meaningful behind. I'd like that, I managed. When we reached downtown, Robert handed me a business card before stepping out. Well, Edward, whatever you're going through, and I can see something's weighing on you, remember this. Thomas built this legacy to take care of you. Don't let anyone take that away. My thank you, Robert. That means more than you know. He nodded, then walked toward the office building, moving slowly but with dignity. I sat in the car for a long time after he left, holding the business card, thinking about my father. Thomas Hollis. 40 years of quiet generosity. 40 years of building something that would outlast him. And I'd spent 15 of those years refusing to speak to him. He'd been a good man, generous visionary, flawed. Just like me. And now I was fighting to protect what he'd built. Not just for myself, but for his memory. When I finally returned to Brielle's house that afternoon, something felt different. The air was heavier, charged with tension. Brielle's car was in the driveway, though she should have been at work. Jason's truck sat beside it. I walked toward the garage, every instinct screaming that something had shifted. And I was about to find out just how desperate my daughter had become. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, Brielle was pacing the front yard, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp enough to carry across the lawn. She didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in whatever urgent conversation had pulled her outside. But the moment she saw my car, she hung up abruptly, the tension in her shoulders shifting into something that almost looked like relief. She crossed the yard quickly, that practiced smile already sliding into place. Dad, how was your appointment? I climbed out slowly, playing the part she expected. Fine. Just routine blood work. Good, good. Her eyes flicked over me, assessing. Come inside. We need to talk. Not a request. An order. The living room felt smaller than usual. Brielle and Jason sat together on the couch, their expressions serious, coordinated. This wasn't spontaneous. They'd rehearsed. Betrayal. Brielle began folding her hands in her lap, like a concerned daughter delivering difficult news. You've been through so much lately, losing Grandpa Thomas, losing Mom. We're worried about you. Jason nodded, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. We think it's time to consider your options, for your care. I let confusion cross my face. Options. A facility, Brielle said carefully. Somewhere with professionals who can help with grief, with confusion. You mean a nursing home? Not exactly. Her tone sharpened slightly, impatience bleeding through. More like residential treatment. For people dealing with emotional struggles. I shook my head slowly. I'm not confused, Brielle. Dad, you left this morning without telling anyone. You could have gotten lost. I told you last night, medical appointment. So regardless, she said, her voice hardening. We've scheduled an evaluation. Dr. Hammond will be here Monday morning at 10. I don't need an evaluation. It's not optional. She leaned forward, and I saw it then, the desperation barely hidden behind the mask of concern. Jason and I are your family. We're doing what's best for you. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Brielle, maybe we should give him time to... Jason. She cut him off without looking at him. We discussed this. He fell silent. I watched them both. Brielle's eyes were calculating, her jaw tight. She was running out of time. 5 days until the gambling debt deadline. 5 days until whatever consequences Marcus Reed had promised came due. And here I sat, the solution to all her problems, if only she could get me declared unfit and locked away. Jason looked sick. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He was complicit, yes, but he wasn't cruel, just weak. That evening, Brielle followed me out to the garage. I heard the scrape of metal against wood before I understood what she was doing. Dad. She called through the door. For your safety, we're keeping this locked at night. We don't want you wandering. I turned, staring at the closed door. Brielle, this is a non-negotiable. Her footsteps retreated across the yard. And then I heard it. The click of the lock echoed. I didn't test it. I knew. The next morning, breakfast arrived on a tray slipped through the narrow gap beneath the door. Toast. Lukewarm coffee. No invitation to come inside. Brielle was anxious, distracted, her phone constantly in her hand. Around mid-morning it rang. She stepped away from the garage window, but her voice carried. Yeah, I told you Monday. The evaluation is Monday. He'll sign everything by Tuesday, I promise. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Casino collectors. Or Marcus. Either way, the net was tightening around her as much as it was around me. That afternoon, Mrs. Thompson appeared at the front door again, holding a container of soup. I watched through the small garage window as Brielle blocked the doorway, her body language defensive. My father isn't well enough for visitors right now. I just want to give him this soup. 5 minutes. I'll make sure he gets it, thank you. The door closed firmly. Dorothy stood on the porch for a long moment, then turned and looked directly toward the garage. Our eyes met through the window. She didn't smile, just raised one hand in a small, sad wave. That evening, my phone buzzed. Andrew's name on the screen. Mrs. Thompson called me, he said, without preamble. She said you're locked in. As of last night. That's unlawful confinement, Edward. We could move right now. No, I said quietly. Monday. Let them think they're winning. Can you hold out? I thought of Lillian. 6 months of pain she'd endured without complaint. 36 hours was nothing. Yes. The mortgage purchase went through at 5 this afternoon. You own both debts. If they default, you control everything. Relief mixed with something darker. Thank you, Andrew. Monday morning, 10 a.m. We end this. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light and counted down the hours. 10 days I'd spent watching my daughter reveal herself. 10 days of careful performance, of playing weak and confused, while she plotted to lock me away. But I'd also watched Jason seen his guilt, his hesitation. He wasn't evil, just weak. There might still be hope for him. As for Brielle, Monday would be her reckoning. Saturday passed in a blur, minimal contact, maximum tension. When Brielle brought dinner on Sunday evening, she lingered at the door. Tomorrow's an important day, Dad. Dr. Hammond is a good man. Just answer his questions honestly. I looked up at her, this woman I'd held as a baby, and smiled gently. I will, sweetheart. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. Then it was gone and she walked away. That night I barely slept. Not from fear, but from anticipation. Because tomorrow the performance would end, and the reckoning would begin. Sunday morning started like every morning for the past 6 months. I reached for the small amber bottle beside my cot, beta blockers, prescribed. After the stress of Lillian's final weeks sent my blood pressure dangerously high. Take one every morning with food. Simple, routine. The bottle wasn't there. I checked the table twice, then the floor beneath it. Nothing. I pulled open the single drawer where I kept my belongings, reading glasses, a book, Thomas's letter. The medication wasn't there either. When Brielle brought breakfast an hour later, dry toast and instant coffee on a plastic tray, I asked carefully, keeping my voice neutral. Have you seen my medication? She set down the tray without looking at me. Your what? To heart medication. The bottle was here yesterday morning. It's missing now. Her eyes flickered surprise, guilt, or something else I couldn't read. Dad, you must have misplaced it. Are you sure you even had it out here? I take it every day. Same time, same place. I need it. I'll look for it later. She waved dismissively. Missing one day won't hurt you. It's not like it's insulin or something. She left before I could respond, the lock clicking behind her. Without the medication, I'd be fine for maybe 2 days. But my blood pressure would climb, my heart rhythm might become irregular. Dizziness, fatigue, increased stroke risk. Was she trying to make me appear confused, forgetful, or willing to risk something worse? Either way, the message was clear. I had no control here, not even over my own health. When Jason brought lunch that afternoon, I tried again. Jason, I need my medication. The bottle that was on this table. Can you help me find it? He frowned. What medication? I described it, the amber bottle, white pills, pharmacy label with my name. I haven't seen it. His confusion looked genuine. Maybe Brielle moved it for safekeeping. She does that sometimes. Can you ask her it's important? I need to take it today. He hesitated, glancing toward the main house, then nodded. I'll check. 10 minutes later, he returned, holding the amber bottle, his face, pale, voice flat and careful. Found it. On the kitchen counter. I took it from him, our eyes meeting briefly. Thank you, son. He watched me swallow the pill with lukewarm water, then left without another word. But I'd seen the look in his eyes, the tightness around his mouth, the way he wouldn't quite meet my gaze. Jason knew where that bottle had been and why. That evening, just after sunset, Brielle unlocked the door and leaned inside, her smile bright and manic. Dad, come have dinner with us tonight. Your last evening before the evaluation. Let's make it nice. Family dinner. I didn't trust it, but refusing would look like the paranoia she wanted Dr. Hammond to see tomorrow. All right, thank you. The walk from the garage to the main house required climbing 3 shallow concrete steps up to the back door. I'd done it dozens of times without thinking, but this time Brielle followed close behind me. I was on the second step when she called out sharply, Dad, wait! I turned instinctively, my balance shifting, weight already committed to the movement. And then I was falling. Brielle was behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Was she steadying me? Or had I felt pressure, a push disguised as help? In that split second, I couldn't tell. All I knew was sudden loss of balance, the lurch forward, the impact. My right hand shot out, catching the door frame, scraping hard against rough concrete. Sharp sting. Warm blood. I caught myself before hitting the ground fully, but the damage was done. Oh my God, Dad, are you okay? Brielle's voice was high, alarmed, perfectly pitched. You tripped. Jason appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. What happened? He lost his balance. I called out to warn him, tried to catch him, but... She looked at Jason, her expression meaningful, rehearsed. He just fell. In the kitchen, while Jason cleaned my scraped palm, blood welling up in the abrasion, not deep but visible, I replayed the moment. Her hand reaching forward, her voice calling my name, the sensation of contact on my shoulder, firm, insistent, or just there, but intent that I couldn't prove. And maybe that was the point. By tomorrow morning, Dr. Hammond would see a man with a bandaged hand who'd fallen on simple stairs. Evidence of instability, of being a danger to himself. Perfect documentation for involuntary commitment. At dinner, Brielle was overly sweet, suffocating in her attention. She'd made pot roast, Lillian's recipe, which she hadn't cooked since the funeral. Dad, tomorrow Dr. Hammond will ask you questions. Just be honest with him. Tell him exactly how you've been feeling. I cut my meat, carefully bandaged hand, making the task awkward. I feel fine, Brielle. Do you... She tilted her head, concern perfectly performed. You forgot where you put your medication this morning. You fell on the stairs just now. You've been so distant lately, so withdrawn. I didn't forget the medication. And I didn't fall, I tripped. See, she gestured toward Jason. You're getting defensive. That's a sign of... Brielle, stop. Jason's voice was quiet but firm. She turned to him, expression hardening, the mask slipping for just a second. He looked down at his plate, jaw set. The silence that followed was suffocating. After dinner, Brielle walked me back to the garage, her hand light on my elbow, solicitous daughter, helping her unsteady father. When we reached the door, she smiled. Get some rest, Dad. Big day tomorrow. The lock clicked behind me. I sat on the cot, examining my scraped hand, and texted Andrew. She withheld medication this morning. Caused a fall tonight or didn't stop it. Hand scraped, visible injury. I'm okay, but she's escalating. Dangerous. His response came immediately. Document everything. Photographs if possible. Tomorrow we end this. Stay strong. I took a photo of my bandaged hand and sent it to him. That night, I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I heard voices rising in the main house, Brielle and Jason arguing loud enough to carry. This has gone too far. Jason's voice raw with desperation. It's too late to back out now. Brielle sharp and furious. We're committed. He signs tomorrow or we lose everything. Then silence. Heavy and absolute. I lay in the dark, bandaged hand, throbbing dully, watching the first gray light of dawn creep through the small window. Monday morning arrived with cold sunlight and the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, a sedan parking precisely in front of the house. At 10 a.m. sharp, the performance would reach its final act. The car door closed with a soft thunk that carried across the quiet yard. I heard footsteps on gravel, and then Brielle's voice pitched high with false warmth. Dr. Hammond, thank you so much for coming. My father has been having such a difficult time. Through the gap in the curtain, I watched a tall man in his 50s step out of the sedan, wire-rimmed glasses catching the morning light. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the practiced smile of someone who'd spent years delivering difficult news to families. Of course, where is he? Brielle gestured toward the garage, her hand trembling slightly. He prefers the quiet out here. Dr. Hammond's eyebrows rose as he took in the converted garage, the distance from the main house. The garage, he's more comfortable here. Her voice turned defensive. I stepped back from the window and sat on the cot, arranging my expression into something mild and weary. When the door opened and Dr. Hammond entered, his gaze swept the space with the practiced assessment of a clinician, noting everything: bare concrete, thin blanket, minimal furniture. Mr. Hollis, I'm Dr. Gregory Hammond. Your daughter asked me to check on you. How are you feeling today? I shook his hand, meeting his eyes steadily. All right, doctor. A bit tired. He sat on the folding chair Brielle must have placed there earlier, pulling out a notepad. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Can you tell me what day it is? Monday, October 28th, 2024. Who is the current president? Donald Trump. Where are we right now? At my daughter's house in the garage. He asked about Lillian's death, about my sleep patterns, about my medications. I answered clearly, coherently, watching the conflict build in his expression. Whatever Brielle had told him, whatever she'd promised, the evidence in front of him didn't support it. I was fully oriented, no memory lapses, no confusion. After 20 minutes, I could see him reaching a conclusion that wouldn't please my daughter. A knock interrupted us. Brielle leaned through the doorway, her smile brittle. Doctor, could I speak with you privately? He glanced at me, then followed her toward the main house. I moved to the window, close enough to hear fragments through the thin walls. He seems fine now, but yesterday he forgot his medication. Brielle's voice carried an edge of desperation. Should I need to be frank with you? Dr. Hammond's tone was professional but firm. Your father shows no signs of cognitive impairment. He's fully oriented and capable of making his own decisions. I can't recommend guardianship or psychiatric placement, based on one fall and one misplaced medication. But we agreed. Her control was slipping. I agreed to evaluate him. My evaluation is that he's competent. A pause, then quieter, more dangerous. What about the $50,000 we discussed? The silence stretched long enough that I held my breath. I can note concerns about his living situation. Dr. Hammond said finally, his voice low and deliberate. But I cannot and will not falsify a diagnosis to support involuntary psychiatric commitment. That would be malpractice. And a felony. My phone buzzed as their footsteps moved away. Andrew's text appeared with a secure link and a single line, "Check this." Court-authorized evidence. I opened the portal. At the top, a legal notice explained that when a bank flags a forged signature on a mortgage, it triggers mandatory investigation, allowing courts to subpoena related communications. Andrew's investigator had petitioned for financial records after discovering Brielle's forgery, and the judge had granted access to emails connected to the fraud. What I read made my hands shake. The first message was dated 4 days after my father's funeral. Brielle had written to Dr. Hammond about my supposed rapid decline memory issues and confusion she claimed I was experiencing. She'd offered $25,000 up front, and another $25,000 after guardianship was granted, asking for his help getting me placed at Golden Meadows. 3 days later, she'd followed up confirming the evaluation time and explicitly asking him to ensure the results supported a finding of diminished capacity and recommend psychiatric placement so her lawyer could file guardianship papers immediately. Dr. Hammond's response had been careful. He'd told her clearly that he couldn't fabricate a diagnosis for involuntary commitment. But if I genuinely showed signs of confusion or posed a danger to myself, he would document those findings honestly, so she'd offered him $50,000 to lock me away. And Dr. Hammond, however compromised by even entertaining the consultation, had drawn a line at outright fraud. I forwarded everything to Andrew just as the garage door opened again. "Mr. Hollis, I've completed my evaluation." Dr. Hammond stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand. "In my professional opinion, you are fully competent and capable of making your own medical and financial decisions." Relief washed through me, though I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you, doctor." He lowered his voice, glancing toward the house. "Your daughter is concerned about you, but I don't see medical grounds for guardianship or psychiatric placement. You're grieving, yes. Living in difficult circumstances, certainly. But you're not incapacitated." He handed me a business card. "If your situation changes, please call me. I appreciate your honesty, doctor." He walked toward the main house where Brielle waited on the porch, arms crossed tightly over her chest. What did he say? Her voice carried across the yard, sharp with barely contained panic. "He's competent. Fully competent." Dr. Hammond pulled a folded paper from his briefcase. "I can't certify someone for involuntary psychiatric commitment without genuine medical cause. I've written my report. He should be living in better conditions, but that's a family matter, not a psychiatric one. This isn't what this is my professional opinion. Good day." He drove away without looking back. Brielle stood frozen for a long moment. The report crumpled in her fist, then spun and stormed inside, slamming the door hard enough that I heard it from the garage. Within seconds, voices rose in the house. "He failed!" Brielle's voice was ragged with fury. "Hammond failed us. We need Plan C." "What's Plan C?" Jason sounded hesitant, almost afraid. "I don't know yet, but we have 3 days until the casino deadline." I texted Andrew immediately. Hammond refused to certify. Ethical enough not to commit fraud. Brielle panicking. Give her 24 hours. Let her make her next move. Sheriff is standing by. I sat on the cot with Dr. Hammond's business card still in my hand and exhaled slowly. That afternoon, I would discover just how desperate my daughter had become and just how far she was willing to go. The unfamiliar car pulled into the driveway just after 2 that afternoon, a black Audi newer model chrome gleaming in the October sun. A man in his early 40s stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of a suit that looked expensive, but slightly too shiny, like costume jewelry passing for real. He wore an expensive watch and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Brielle rushed out, before he'd even closed the car door, throwing her arms around him with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. This had to be Marcus Reed. They stood too close, talking in low voices I couldn't hear from the garage. Then Brielle glanced toward the house, checking if Jason was watching, before leading Marcus inside through the front door. I pressed closer to the window where the living room curtains hadn't been fully drawn. Their voices carried through the cracked glass fragments at first, then clearer, so Hammond didn't work out. Marcus's voice was smooth, practiced. "That's okay, baby. We have other options." Like what? Brielle's desperation bled through every word. "I'm out of time, Marcus. The casino wants $310,000 by Thursday. That's 3 days. How much can you get if you sell one of his properties? He owns them, not me. I can't sell anything without his signature." "What about the house? Can you refinance again?" A pause. "I already did. $75,000 second mortgage last month." Marcus laughed low and appreciative. "How'd you manage that?" Another pause, longer this time. "I signed his name." You forged his signature." The delight in his voice made my skin crawl. "That's my girl. See, you're more capable than you think." Jason's voice cut in from somewhere deeper in the room, strained and unhappy. "Brielle, this is insane. If he finds out, he won't find out if he's not around to contest it." Marcus spoke casually, as if discussing the weather. "Emergency psychiatric holds didn't work fine, but accidents happen all the time. Old man living alone in a cold garage takes the wrong medication, falls down the stairs. Nobody questions it." The silence that followed felt like ice water in my veins. Jason's voice came again, barely above a whisper. "Marcus, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you stop being weak. Brielle's doing what needs to be done. You either help or get out of the way." "He's right." Brielle's voice had hardened, all pretense stripped away. "We're past the point of turning back. This ends one way or another by Thursday." I stepped away from the window, hands shaking, and pulled out my phone. My fingers felt numb as I typed the message to Andrew. "Marcus Reed here. Just threatened me, implied accidents. Need help now." Andrew called within 30 seconds, voice sharp with concern. "Edward, I'm 10 minutes away." "What exactly did you hear?" I whispered everything, keeping my voice low. When I finished, Andrew was quiet for a moment. "That's conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly worse. I'm calling Sheriff Davis right now. Stay on the line." I heard him dial, heard the brief conversation. Then he was back. "Deputy's coming for a welfare check. Should be there in 20 minutes. Can you hold out?" "Yes." "I'm on my way too. Don't let them know you heard anything." The deputy arrived sooner than expected, a young officer, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Through the window, I watched him knock on the front door. Brielle answered Marcus, hanging back just out of sight. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Miller. We received a welfare check request for Edward Hollis. I need to speak with him." Brielle hesitated, her smile brittle. I saw Marcus lean in, whisper something. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Of course, Deputy. He's in the garage. I'll show you." She led him across the yard, Marcus watching from the doorway with arms crossed. When they reached the garage, Brielle unlocked it and stepped aside, staying close enough to hear every word. Deputy Miller nodded to me. "Mr. Hollis, I'm Deputy Miller. Are you all right, sir?" I met his eyes, calculating. If I told him everything now, it would end here, arrests, charges, chaos. But I wouldn't get to face Brielle and Marcus together. I wouldn't get to show them that I'd known all along. I'm managing deputy. Are you here voluntarily? Do you feel safe? I glanced at Brielle, who was watching with barely concealed tension. I'm with family. I'm safe. It wasn't true, but I needed 2 more days. If you need help, sir, you can tell me. That's what I'm here for. I understand, deputy. Thank you for checking on me. He handed me a card with the sheriff's direct number, holding my gaze long enough that I knew he suspected something. Then he left, and Brielle locked the door behind him. I heard her voice through the window, sharp with paranoia. Someone called that in. Who? Probably the nosy neighbor. Marcus sounded unconcerned. Old lady next door keeps bringing soup. Mrs. Thompson. I knew she was a problem. Less than half an hour later, another knock. This time, Andrew's voice carried clear authority. I'm Andrew Sterling, attorney. I need to speak with my client, Edward Hollis. My father doesn't need an attorney. Brielle's voice was defensive. That's for him to decide. May I see him? She couldn't refuse without raising more suspicion. I heard the lock turn, and Andrew stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind him. Edward. He kept his voice low. Are you okay? I heard everything. Marcus is here. They're planning something worse than psychiatric commitment. Andrew's jaw tightened. I have the forgery documents. Second mortgage from September with your forged signature. We can press charges right now. Get you out of here. Not yet. I met his eyes. I want to confront all of them at once. Wednesday morning. I want them to see what they've done. I want them to know I knew all along. That's risky, Edward. Another 48 hours. Wednesday, no later. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Your call. But I'm staying close. Any sign things escalate, you call me immediately. I will. After Andrew left, the house fell quiet. Marcus's car was still in the driveway, and I could see shadows moving behind the living room curtains. That night, when Brielle came to lock the garage door, Marcus stood beside her in the darkening yard. Just 2 more days, she said, her voice carrying across the cold air. Then we'll have everything. Marcus kissed her forehead, his hand proprietary on her shoulder. 2 more days, baby, then we disappear. They walked back to the house, and I heard the lock click into place. I sat in the dark, listening to their muffled voices through the walls, and counted down the hours. 2 more days. 48 hours. And then Brielle would discover that she'd never had anything to take. She'd built her entire scheme on a foundation of lies, forgery, and desperation, and on Wednesday morning it would all collapse. She had no idea that in 2 days she would have nothing at all. I woke before dawn to the sound of something scraping against wood. Through the small window, I watched Brielle wedge a heavy 2x4 against the garage door handle, bracing it at an angle so it couldn't be opened from inside. She tested it once, then walked back to the house without looking back. I stood and examined the barricade through the gap in the doorframe. The board was thick, professionally cut, positioned with the kind of deliberate care that said this wasn't improvised panic. This was calculated. I saw the board and felt nothing. No panic, no fear, only clarity. This was evidence. I photographed it from multiple angles, the timestamp visible in each frame, then sent them to Andrew with a short message. Barricaded. Photographing everything. Mrs. Thompson watching from her window. Move up timeline. His response came within a minute. Hold 24 hours. Sheriff needs this level of evidence for immediate intervention. Document everything. I'm calling him now. So I documented. The barricade. The absence of food or water. The temperature 48 degrees and dropping as October gave way to November. I made notes with timestamps, careful and methodical, building a case, one photograph at a time. Around midday, I heard footsteps approaching. Jason's voice came through the door, quiet and strained. Dad, I'm sliding lunch through. There's a gap under the door. A paper plate appeared, sandwich, apple, bottle of water. Meager, but functional. I heard him hesitate on the other side of the wood. Jason. I said, keeping my voice level and calm. You know this is unlawful confinement. That's a felony in Colorado. 3 to 6 years. Silence. Then, she said it was temporary, just until... Until what? Until I sign away everything I own, until I disappear. I paused, letting that settle. You're an accessory to a felony? Unless you help me. Another long silence. What do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning when the sheriff comes, don't interfere. That's all I'm asking. I heard him exhale a sound, caught between relief and resignation. Okay. His footsteps retreated across the yard. Through the window, I watched him pause at the back door of the house, his shoulders hunched, before going inside. By mid-afternoon, I'd turned the garage into a makeshift command center. I reviewed the evidence checklist one more time, ticking off each item mentally. 3 recordings with clear audio of Brielle and Jason discussing the psychiatric facility, plan the casino debt, the forgery. Photos documenting my living conditions and the locked doors. Mrs. Thompson's testimony ready and waiting. Andrew's financial investigation complete, showing the forged signature on the $75,000 mortgage. Email evidence of the bribe offered to Dr. Hammond. Marcus Reed's threats recorded yesterday, talking about accidents and problems that needed handling. Everything was ready. That evening, I heard Mrs. Thompson's voice on the phone, not talking to me, but I could hear her through the thin walls of her house next door. Her window open despite the cold. "Hey, Mr. Sterling, this is Dorothy Thompson. I'm looking at his garage right now. There's still a board wedged against the door. He's imprisoned. This has gone beyond concern. This is criminal." A pause while she listened. Tomorrow morning, yes, absolutely. I can testify. I have photos time-stamped taken from my kitchen window. I have a log of every day he's been locked in, every visitor she's turned away. I even have a short video from Sunday of her yelling at him through the window. Another pause. 9 o'clock. I'll be ready. Relief washed through me, though I didn't let myself dwell on it. One more night. 14 hours. After 10 that night, voices rose in the main house. Marcus, Brielle, and Jason, their argument carrying through the walls. I pressed my phone against the concrete recording. "If he doesn't cooperate by morning, we escalate." Marcus's voice was cold, matter-of-fact. "Escalate how?" Jason sounded afraid. "Better you don't know. Just stay out of the way." The audio was faint, but audible. I played it back twice to make sure, then sent it to Andrew. Recorded threat. "Escalate. Be careful tomorrow. 2 deputies confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. Get some rest, Edward." I lay down on the cot, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. 13 days. From the moment I'd overheard Brielle's plot through the cracked window, 13 days of performance and patience and careful documentation. And it ended tomorrow. Sleep came in fragments. I woke to every sound, a car passing on the street, the wind rattling the garage roof, footsteps in the main house as someone moved through the dark. But I didn't feel fear. I felt anticipation. The sky was still gray with early dawn when I heard the first car pull into the driveway. Then a second. I moved to the window and saw Andrew's sedan, followed immediately by a sheriff's vehicle with county markings. My chest tightened, not with fear but with something close to vindication. Footsteps on the front porch, then pounding official and uncompromising. "Brielle Hollis, this is Sheriff Davis. Open the door." A pause. Then Brielle's voice, muffled and confused. "What is this about?" "We have a welfare check and a legal matter to discuss. Open the door now." I heard the lock turn, the door swing open. Through my window, I saw Brielle in the doorway in a bathrobe, her hair uncombed, her face pale. Behind Sheriff Davis stood Andrew in his overcoat and Deputy Miller in uniform. A second deputy I didn't recognize stood to the side, hand resting casually near his belt. Panic flashed across Brielle's face as she took in the scene. 2 law enforcement officers, her father's attorney, all standing on her porch at dawn. "Where is Edward Hollis?" Sheriff Davis's voice carried clear authority. "In the garage, but—" "Show us, now." Brielle hesitated, glancing back into the house where I could hear Jason and Marcus moving. Then she nodded, pulling her robe tighter, and started across the yard toward the garage. I heard footsteps approaching, multiple sets, purposeful and firm. The scrape of the 2x4 being pulled away from the door. The click of the lock turning. The door swung open, and morning light flooded the dim garage. Sheriff Davis stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp and assessing. Behind him, Andrew met my gaze with something like relief. I stood, straightened my shirt, and stepped forward. "Good morning, Sheriff," I said calmly. "I've been expecting you." As I heard Brielle's protests fade and footsteps approach the garage, I stood, straightened my shirt, and prepared to step out of that prison for the last time. The reckoning had arrived. The board scraped against concrete as Deputy Miller pulled it free, wood clattering onto the driveway. Sheriff Davis pushed the door open wide, and cold morning air rushed into the garage, carrying the scent of October frost and freedom. I stepped into the doorway, blinking against pale dawn light. 13 days I'd spent in that space, performing weakness, documenting abuse, building a case piece by careful piece. Now I stood upright, shoulders back, meeting the sheriff's assessing gaze with steady eyes. "Mr. Hollis, are you all right?" "I am now sheriff, thank you for coming." Andrew appeared beside him, relief visible in the tight set of his shoulders. "Edward, are you ready?" "I am." Brielle stood on the front porch in her bathrobe, arms wrapped around herself. Behind her, Jason hovered in the doorway, face ashen. Through the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of Marcus Reed trying to ease toward the back door. "Sir, please stay where you are." Deputy Miller's voice carried across the yard, polite but unyielding. "We have questions for everyone." Marcus froze, then turned back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, officer. Just getting some air." Sheriff Davis gestured toward the house. "Everyone inside. Living room, now." The living room felt smaller than I remembered. Brielle and Jason sat together on the couch. Brielle's hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Marcus took the armchair by the window, posture casual but eyes tracking every exit. Sheriff Davis and Deputy Miller stood by the door. Andrew positioned himself near the fireplace, briefcase in hand. Mrs. Thompson arrived, standing quietly by the doorway as witness. I chose the chair opposite the couch, sitting slowly, deliberately, letting them see I was in control now. 13 days ago. I began, voice steady and clear. I returned from my father's funeral. I just learned I inherited significant assets. I came home planning to tell you, Brielle, to share the news, to help you however I could. Brielle opened her mouth. "Dad, you're confused." I held up one hand, and something in my expression stopped her. "I'm not finished." She fell silent. "Before I could tell you anything, I overheard you and Jason through the window, plotting to take whatever you thought I had, planning to have me declared mentally unfit so you could control my finances, conspiring to lock me away in a psychiatric facility where I couldn't contest anything you did. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. I recorded your conversations, all of them. I documented your abuse. I gathered evidence, photographs, witness testimony, financial records. Everything." Brielle's face had gone pale, trapped, and desperate. Jason sat with his head in his hands, unable to look at me. Marcus leaned forward slightly, already looking for escape routes. "You have $310,000 in gambling debts." I continued, looking directly at Brielle. "2 casinos, one here in Colorado, one in Nevada, accumulated over 18 months. You forged my signature on a $75,000 second mortgage in September to buy yourself time. You bribed Dr. Hammond $50,000 to declare me incompetent. You planned to sell whatever I inherited and use the money to pay your debts. I turned to Marcus. And you, Marcus Reed. 2 fraud convictions. You manipulated my daughter, convinced her she deserved my money, planned to scam her once she got it. You threatened me. You talked about accidents and problems that needed handling. Marcus's smile had vanished. Sheriff Davis stepped forward. Mr. Hollis, do you wish to press charges at this time? Not yet, Sheriff. I want them to hear the rest first. Andrew opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Brielle, your father established protections the moment he learned what you were planning. He set up an irrevocable trust with me as trustee. You cannot access it. You cannot contest it. It's permanent. What trust? Brielle's voice was thin, brittle. What are you talking about? The details aren't important right now, Andrew said calmly. What is important is this: as of Saturday, October 26th, Edward purchased both mortgages on this house. The original $180,000 you and Jason took out in 2022, and your fraudulent $75,000 second mortgage from September. Jason's head snapped up. What? He is now the lender. He owns the debt. And because you're 2 months in default on the first mortgage and your second was obtained through forgery, he's legally entitled to foreclose. Foreclose? Jason's voice cracked. On our home, Andrew's expression remained neutral. It was never your home. This house belonged to Lillian Hollis. She left it to Edward in her will. You've been living here rent-free for 6 months. I leaned forward, meeting Brielle's eyes. I'm giving you 21 days to vacate. That's more than you deserve. Brielle stood, voice rising. You can't do this. I'm your daughter. And I was your father. My voice stayed level, though emotion tightened my throat. But you treated me like an inconvenience, like a problem to be solved. You locked me in a garage, withheld my medication, conspired to have me imprisoned. You forged my signature and stole from me. And when none of that worked, you brought in a man who threatened my life. Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. Mr. Hollis, we can arrest Mrs. Hollis and Mr. Reed right now for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful confinement. I shook my head. Give me 1 more day, Sheriff. 24 hours. I want to give them a chance to understand what they've done. Sheriff Davis studied my face, then nodded slowly. 24 hours. Then we file charges whether you want us to or not. I stood straightening my jacket. Without another word, I walked toward the door. Mrs. Thompson stepped aside and I caught her eye. She nodded once, expression sad but supportive. Outside, the October morning was cold and bright. Andrew followed me to his car. Tomorrow, I said quietly. Thursday, Halloween, the day their casino debt comes due, that's when I deliver the final blow. Andrew nodded. I'll have everything ready. I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see Brielle standing in the middle of the living room, Jason beside her, both stunned into silence. But there was nowhere for any of them to run. The trap had closed. They just didn't know how tightly yet. Before I take you into the final confrontation, before I show you how 13 days of silence led to justice, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever faced a situation like this in your own life? A moment when someone you trusted betrayed you, and you had to decide, forgive, confront, or walk away, share your story in the comments, even if it's just a sentence. Knowing I'm not alone in this makes telling it easier. And just so you know, the narrative ahead blends experience with storytelling choices designed for clarity and impact. If you'd prefer not to hear it, you're welcome to stop here. Now, let me tell you what happened on October 31st. Halloween morning arrived with a bitter wind that stripped the last leaves from the trees. I pulled up to the house just after 9, Andrew beside me. Behind us, Sheriff Davis followed in his patrol car, and behind him a dark sedan carrying 2 men in suits, debt collectors from Silver Peak Casino and Mountain Ridge Gaming. Brielle answered the door on the 3rd knock, still in yesterday's clothes, face drawn and pale from a sleepless night. She looked past me to the cars lining the driveway, and I saw fear flash across her features. The taller collector stepped forward, voice professional and flat. "Mrs. Brielle Hollis, we're here on behalf of Silver Peak Casino and Mountain Ridge Gaming. You have an outstanding debt of $310,000 in principal. Payment is due today." Her hands tightened on the doorframe. "I don't have it yet. I need more time." "Ma'am, you've had 18 months. We don't extend further." I stepped forward, meeting her eyes. "Actually, gentlemen, I believe I can help settle this matter." The living room felt crowded with all of us, assembled Brielle and Jason on the couch. Marcus Reed by the window, with Deputy Miller positioned between him and the door. Sheriff Davis near the fireplace. Andrew with his briefcase, Mrs. Thompson sitting quietly as witness, and the two debt collectors flanking the entrance. I remained standing, letting the silence stretch until everyone's attention focused on me. "How much does she owe?" I asked the collectors. "Exactly." The taller one consulted a tablet. $310,000 principal plus $42,000 in accumulated interest and collection fees. Total debt $352,000. I nodded slowly. "I'll pay it, in full, today." Brielle's eyes widened, something between hope and confusion crossing her face. "Dad!" "But not for you," I continued, voice steady. "For me. Because I don't want your poor choices to destroy what's left of this family or tarnish the legacy my father built. But my help comes with conditions. Non-negotiable conditions." Andrew opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents, laying them on the coffee table. "First," I said, "you sign a confession admitting to forging my signature on a $75,000 mortgage, admitting to elder abuse, unlawful confinement, and conspiracy to commit fraud through attempted involuntary psychiatric commitment. Second, Marcus Reed leaves this house immediately and never contacts you again. If he does, he faces arrest. Third, Jason cooperates fully with authorities and testifies truthfully if charges are filed. Fourth, you enter treatment 90 days inpatient at a licensed gambling addiction facility, non-negotiable. And fifth, you both vacate this house within 21 days. It will be sold, and the proceeds placed in trust for any future grandchildren, if you ever have them, and if they need protection from you." Brielle's voice came out small and broken. "And if I don't agree," Sheriff Davis stepped forward, "then I arrest you right now for elder abuse, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted involuntary psychiatric commitment. You'll be facing 5 to 10 years in prison, possibly more." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who'd become someone I barely recognized. "Your choice, Brielle." For a long moment she stared at the documents on the table. Then her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice broke. "You must have gotten something from Grandpa. Why not just help me? Why make me sign these things?" "This isn't about money," I said quietly. "This is about what you did to me. I was desperate, so you locked me in a garage." My voice remained level, but I felt the weight of 13 days pressing against my chest. "You withheld my medication. You tried to have me committed to a psychiatric facility, where I'd be confined behind locked doors, declared mentally incompetent, stripped of every right I had. You forged my signature. You conspired with a man who talked about making me disappear. Every single day you had a choice. You could have asked me for help, but instead you chose cruelty. You chose manipulation. You chose to treat me like an obstacle instead of a human being." Jason spoke up, voice rough. "Edward, I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you instead of going along with it. You should have. But you didn't." I turned to him. "You helped lock me in. You watched her withhold my medication. You stood by while Marcus Reed talked about accidents." "I know." Jason put his head in his hands. "I'll cooperate. I'll testify. Whatever you need." Andrew handed him a document. "Then sign this. It's your statement detailing everything you witnessed." Jason took the pen with shaking hands and signed. Marcus had been quiet throughout, but now he stood. "I don't have to listen to this." "Sit down, Mr. Reed." Sheriff Davis's voice carried quiet authority. "You're not leaving. You conspired to defraud an elderly man. You manipulated my daughter to steal from me. You threatened my safety." Sheriff Davis moved beside him. "Marcus Reed, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse." Marcus's face twisted with anger, but he didn't resist as the handcuffs clicked into place. Deputy Miller escorted him toward the door. I turned back to Brielle one final time. "This house will be sold. Every penny goes into a trust managed by Andrew for future generations if they ever exist. Not for you. You made your choices, Brielle. Now you live with the consequences." I walked to Andrew's car and paused, looking back at the house where I'd spent 6 months as a widower and 13 days as a prisoner. The October wind bit through my jacket, but I didn't feel cold anymore. As I walked out into the cold October air, I felt the weight of 13 days lift from my shoulders. The nightmare, the manipulation, the confinement, the cruelty was over. But my new life, the life my father had spent 40 years building for me, was just beginning. The morning after Halloween, I found myself seated across from District Attorney Sarah Parker in her downtown office with Andrew positioned beside me. She methodically reviewed the extensive collection of evidence we had painstakingly assembled over those 13 harrowing days. The materials spread before her told a complete story. Recordings capturing damning conversations, photographs documenting every detail, witness statements corroborating the timeline, financial documents revealing the depth of betrayal, all organized in precise chronological order like chapters in a book no one would wish to read. After 20 minutes of careful examination, she raised her eyes from the documents, her professional expression revealing nothing. "This compilation is remarkably thorough, almost disturbingly so, I must say. I had considerable time on my hands." I replied quietly, my voice steady despite the memories. "Spending 13 days confined in a freezing garage provides ample opportunity for thoroughness." She acknowledged this with a solemn nod, then lifted the signed confession Brielle had provided. "Given the strength of this evidence, we have grounds to pursue several felony charges. Elder abuse qualifies as a Class 4 felony, carrying a potential sentence of up to 6 years imprisonment. Forgery constitutes a Class 5 felony with up to 3 years. Financial fraud represents another Class 5 charge. Additionally, we're including attempted involuntary psychiatric commitment, which carries supplementary penalties considering the documented conspiracy involved." "What are the possibilities regarding a plea arrangement?" Andrew inquired thoughtfully. District Attorney Bradford reclined in her chair, considering the options carefully. "If your daughter successfully completes the full 90-day inpatient treatment program, agrees to 5 years of supervised probation, requiring monthly check-ins with her probation officer, pays complete restitution, covering all legal expenses, and provides full cooperation with our ongoing investigation into Marcus Reed's activities, I can recommend reducing these charges to misdemeanors. Under those conditions, she would serve no jail time whatsoever. However, should she violate even a single condition of this agreement, all felony charges immediately return to the table for prosecution." I exchanged a meaningful glance with Andrew. His slight nod conveyed agreement. "What about Jason's situation?" I asked, needing to understand the complete picture. "He'll face charges as an accessory after the fact. However, given his extensive cooperation throughout the investigation and his willingness to provide detailed testimony, I would recommend 500 hours of community service combined with 2 years of supervised probation. He appears genuinely remorseful about his involvement. And Marcus Reed," her expression hardened noticeably at the mention of his name. "Mr. Reed faces federal charges now. Wire fraud conspiracy to commit elder abuse. He made a critical error when he involved those Nevada casinos in his schemes. That interstate activity places him squarely under federal jurisdiction. His bail application was denied this morning. The court considers him both a flight risk and a danger to the community, particularly given his prior convictions. His trial date is scheduled for March. He's already attempted to contact Brielle from jail, Andrew interjected. We've obtained a court order blocking all communication. Bradford nodded with clear approval. Excellent decision. Maintain that separation absolutely. That same afternoon, Brielle made her appearance before Judge Morrison accompanied by her court-appointed attorney. I sat in the gallery alongside Andrew, observing as my daughter stood before the bench, wearing clothes Mrs. Thompson had kindly loaned her. Her face appearing pale and visibly drawn from the stress. Her lawyer formally presented the negotiated plea agreement. Judge Morrison read through every provision slowly and deliberately, then peered at Brielle over his reading glasses with a penetrating gaze. Mrs. Hollis, do you fully understand these terms and their implications? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice emerged, barely audible, trembling slightly. And do you accept full and complete responsibility for all your actions? Brielle nodded initially, then found her voice to speak clearly. I do, Your Honor. I was desperate and trapped in addiction. I inflicted terrible harm on the person who loved me most in this world. I betrayed my father's trust in the most unconscionable way imaginable. I genuinely want help. I desperately need help. Judge Morrison studied her intently for what felt like an eternity. Mrs. Hollis, you are extraordinarily fortunate that your father possesses such compassion. Most individuals in his position would demand prosecution to the absolute fullest extent the law permits. Your treatment program begins Monday morning. Do not squander this opportunity he's giving you. I won't, Your Honor, I promise. The following Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I drove Brielle to Serenity Hills Treatment Center, located in Colorado Springs, a 2-hour journey south of Denver. The ride passed in near-complete silence, except for the radio playing softly classic rock stations, the kind Lillian had always enjoyed. Brielle stared fixedly out the window throughout the entire drive, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, fingers occasionally twisting together nervously. When I finally pulled into the facility's curved driveway, she spoke at last. Dad, I'm deeply sorry. I realize those words aren't nearly enough, but I honestly don't know what else to say. I kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel, watching the building's main entrance where other families conducted their own difficult farewells. It's a beginning, Brielle. Get real help. Not just treatment for the gambling addiction, but genuine therapy addressing whatever made you believe it was acceptable to treat another human being, especially your own father, the way you treated me. Will you visit me? Her voice sounded small, almost childlike in its vulnerability. I turned to look directly at her, meeting her eyes. I honestly don't know yet. We'll see how things progress. She nodded slowly, accepting that uncertain answer, then climbed out of the vehicle. I watched her walk toward the entrance, her shoulders hunched defensively against the harsh November wind, and felt something complex twist in my chest. Anger intermingled with sadness, relief that she was finally getting help, even though it required this level of destruction to reach this point. I unfolded the first page with deliberate slowness, treating the paper as though it might crumble under the emotional weight it carried. My father's distinctive handwriting, precise, elegantly slanted, the identical script I remembered from birthday cards, sent decades earlier, covered every inch of the page. My dear Edward, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm profoundly sorry for so many things. 15 years. That's how long we permitted pride and stubbornness to keep us separated. You believed I disapproved of your career choices, your decisions, your entire life. I thought you didn't respect mine. We were both complete fools. The truth is, I was proud of you every single day. When you graduated with your engineering degree, I was there, positioned in the back of the auditorium, concealed behind other parents. I didn't want to intrude on your moment, but I absolutely couldn't miss it. You wore that blue tie Lillian had given you. You looked remarkably like your mother. When you married Lillian, I watched from the street outside the church. She was breathtakingly beautiful, and you radiated happiness. That was sufficient for me. When Lillian became ill, I desperately wanted to reach out to offer assistance. But fear paralyzed me. Fear you'd reject my overtures. Fear I'd waited far too long. So I did the only thing within my power. I built a legacy specifically for you. The shopping centers, the vineyard, the patents, everything was for you. To provide security, freedom, a life without the struggles I endured. I wanted you to have meaningful choices. I know about Brielle. I encountered her once 5 years ago at an engineering conference in Denver. She introduced herself completely unaware I was her grandfather. She spoke extensively about money, ambition, what she deserved. I recognized the same destructive hunger I'd witnessed in my own father, the kind that systematically destroys families. It concerned me then. It concerns me now. I'm leaving everything to you because I trust you implicitly. You possess Lillian's compassion, my discipline, and the wisdom to utilize wealth for good, not greed. If Brielle attempts to take it, and I strongly suspect she will protect yourself fiercely. Don't allow guilt to make you vulnerable. Family is defined by love and respect, not merely blood. I hope wherever I am, I can finally tell you what I should have said 15 years ago. I'm sorry. I love you, and I'm immensely proud to call you my son. Your father, Thomas. I read it 3 complete times. The first reading through tears, I made no attempt to stop. The second, with my hand pressed firmly over my mouth, struggling to contain sounds threatening to break free. The third, quietly absorbing every word, like medicine healing wounds I'd carried for 15 years. He'd been present, at my graduation ceremony, at my wedding celebration, watching from shadows because he didn't know how to bridge the gap we'd constructed between us. And he'd known about Brielle, recognized her true nature 5 years earlier, and deliberately structured his will to protect me from it. My father had loved me deeply. He'd simply been too stubborn, too proud, too afraid to express it while we both still had precious time. I folded the letter with reverent care and held it against my chest. Sitting alone in the hotel room as November darkness descended outside. For the first time since Lillian's funeral, I allowed myself to cry, not from grief or anger, but from something approaching genuine peace. Over the following week, I systematically said my goodbyes. Mrs. Thompson opened her door with flour coating her hands mid-baking and enthusiastically waved me inside despite my protests. I presented her with flowers and a heartfelt handwritten thank you card. I'm glad I could help, dear. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Lillian would be incredibly proud of how you handled everything. When I launched the foundation, the Thomas Hollis Foundation, I want you on the advisory board, if you're willing. Her eyes filled with tears. I'd be deeply honored, Edward. Andrew and I met for lunch at the restaurant, where we'd first discussed the inheritance back when $25 million felt impossibly abstract. Now it simply represented responsibility. I thank you for everything, I said sincerely. For believing me, for moving decisively, for being 3 steps ahead when I couldn't think past the next day. Robert Fleming called his voice warm. Can I visit sometime? Bring stories about your father I have 40 years worth. Please do. I'd genuinely like to hear them all. Even Frank stopped by my last night in Denver, hat in hand, awkward but sincere. Heard you're leaving. Wanted to say goodbye properly. On the 14th, I packed my minimal belongings. Photos of Lillian, our wedding day, our final anniversary before illness struck. Thomas's letter already worn from repeated readings. Lillian's wedding ring on a chain I'd begun wearing around my neck. Everything else I donated to charity or abandoned. I didn't need much, just memories and purpose. The next morning, I loaded the Camry before sunrise. November 15th, moving day. I pointed the car westward and merged onto U-70 as dawn broke over the plains behind me. The highway climbed steadily into the Rockies. the landscape transforming dramatically flat grasslands yielding to foothills, foothills to magnificent mountains, aspens standing golden against evergreen slopes even as winter approached. Every mile felt like releasing accumulated weight. The anger, the hurt, the exhaustion. I left it all behind on those Colorado roads, watching it vanish in the rearview mirror. 4 hours later, I turned onto a gravel road marked by a hand-carved wooden sign, Hollis Ridge. The vineyard spread across gentle slopes, 15 acres of dormant vines arranged in precise rows awaiting spring. Beyond stood a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, weathered wood, that had earned its character through decades. And beyond everything, mountains rising blue and endless against November sky. My father had chosen this place, had worked it for 8 years, had built something beautiful and peaceful and promising. And he'd left it to me. The front door opened and Martin Cooper, the vineyard manager, stepped onto the porch. He raised a welcoming hand, patient. I climbed out slowly and stood breathing mountain air that tasted like pine and possibility. Martin Cooper crossed the yard with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years working soil and vine, his flannel shirt worn soft from countless seasons, his smile radiating genuine warmth. He extended a weathered hand as I emerged from the car. "You must be Edward." "I'm Martin Cooper. Been managing this place for 8 years now. Your father spoke of you frequently." His grip was firm, his palms calloused from honest labor. "Welcome home. Mr. Cooper, Martin, please." He gestured invitingly toward the substantial house. "Come on, let me show you everything." The main house exceeded my expectations. 4 spacious bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, timber and stone construction, achieving both rustic charm and quiet elegance. The wraparound porch offered breathtaking views of the vineyard sloping gently toward distant mountains, the dormant vines arranged in precise rows revealing my father's engineering mind at work. Inside, the furniture was understated but expertly crafted. A leather couch worn to comfortable perfection. Bookshelves lined with volumes on winemaking, structural engineering, and poetry. That final category genuinely surprised me. The kitchen opened onto a dining area featuring a table that could comfortably seat 8 guests. "Your father loved hosting people here," Martin observed, watching me absorb the space. "Not frequently, but when he did, he committed completely." Behind the main house stood a smaller guest cottage, currently unoccupied, and beyond that, a workshop filled with tools and half-finished projects. But the vineyard itself commanded my attention, 15 acres of Cabernet Merlot and Pinot Noir, all dormant as winter approached. Yet you could sense the potential sleeping beneath the cold soil. The tasting room was closed for the season, a modest wooden building, with shelves lined with bottles bearing simple labels. Hollis Ridge, 2020. Hollis Ridge, 2022. "Your father didn't produce commercially," Martin explained. "Just sufficient quantities for friends, for himself. He insisted good wine couldn't be rushed." We walked the rows methodically, Martin identifying different sections, explaining Thomas's meticulous approach to cultivation. Finally, he guided me to the workshop. "Your father purchased this property in 2016. He was 81 years old. Most people that age contemplate retirement homes. Thomas wanted somewhere he could build something tangible with his hands. He never told me." I said quietly, the words catching slightly. "He regretted that every single day." Martin opened the workshop door. "Said every morning over coffee that he wished he possessed the courage to simply pick up the phone and call you." The workshop smelled richly of sawdust and varnish. A substantial workbench dominated one wall covered in detailed plans and sketches. In the corner sat an intricate architectural model, a community center clearly complete with gathering spaces and small residential units. "He was developing this when he became ill," Martin said softly. "Plans for a community center focused on elder care. He wanted it integrated into your foundation." I stared at the model, stunned. He knew I'd start a foundation. He hoped. He believed in you, Edward. Far more than you probably realize. Martin reached into a drawer and retrieved a leather-bound journal worn at the edges from repeated handling. He asked me to give you this when you arrived. Said you'd need it. I accepted it carefully, opening to a random page. The date, June 12th, 1979. My wedding day. Edward got married today. I watched from across the street, hidden behind a tree like some kind of fool. Lillian wore white lace and looked radiant. Edward couldn't stop smiling. I should have been there. I should have walked him down that aisle. But I'd burned that bridge years ago. Still, he looked happy. That has to be enough. I turned pages with trembling hands. November 3rd, 2023. Lillian is sick. Terminal. I found out through old colleagues who know Edward's in-laws. I sent money to the hospital, $20,000 anonymously. It's the least I can do. I want to call him to be there. But what right do I have? I abandoned him for pride. Now he's losing the woman he loves, and I'm just a coward hiding in the mountains. August 15th, 2024. I'm dying. Doctor says 6 months, maybe less. I've updated my will. Everything goes to Edward, the shopping centers, the vineyard, the patents. He'll know what to do with it. He's a better man than I ever was. I just hope he can forgive me. I closed the journal and pressed it against my chest, attempting to contain the profound ache filling me. Martin stood quietly nearby, respectfully providing space. He loved you deeply, Martin said finally. Never doubt that fundamental truth. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Over the following week, I methodically settled into the house. I maintained Thomas's bedroom exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses resting on the nightstand, his books stacked neatly and moved into one of the guest rooms. Erasing him so quickly felt profoundly wrong. Martin patiently taught me the winter routines, pruning techniques, soil testing procedures, planning strategies for spring planting. The work was physically demanding and emotionally grounding, and I found myself grateful for the distraction it provided. Local winemakers stopped by to introduce themselves, welcoming me into the small community with the kind of easy hospitality existing only where people genuinely know their neighbors. When Thanksgiving arrived, Martin graciously invited me to join his family's dinner. I declined politely, not yet ready for that level of intimacy. Instead, I spent the day alone on the porch, wrapped securely in a blanket, watching snow dust, the distant peaks, and reflecting on all the Thanksgivings I'd spent with Lillian. With Brielle before everything disintegrated with the family that used to exist. But I wasn't dwelling in grief anymore. The vineyard was teaching me something profound about patience, about natural cycles of dormancy and growth, about how sometimes things must die back completely before they can bloom again magnificently. Late November, as the first substantial snow began falling, I called Andrew with sudden clarity. I want to start the foundation now. What's your vision? His voice carried focused energy. To help elderly people facing abuse, exploitation, abandonment, legal aid, safe housing, counseling. Everything I wish had existed, except I was fortunate enough to have resources. We spent an hour outlining the complete structure. Timeline 6 months for proper establishment. Launch in May 2025. By December's arrival, snow covering the dormant vines and mountains rising white against brilliant blue sky, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: hope. Not the desperate, grasping variety, but something quieter and infinitely more sustainable. 6 months after that first December snow, I stood before nearly 100 people in a rented community center in Colorado Springs and told them the story I'd spent months learning how to tell without bitterness consuming every word. 6 months ago, I was locked in a garage by my own daughter. Denied food, isolated, stripped of dignity. She conspired to have me declared mentally unfit and locked away in a psychiatric facility so she could steal what my father had left me. I paused deliberately, letting the weight of those words settle heavily. But I fought back not with anger, but with strategy, patience, and the help of good people who believed me when I desperately needed someone to believe. The room fell silent, except for the quiet sound of people listening intently, truly listening. Today I stand here free, whole, and determined to help others facing what I faced. The Lillian and Thomas Hollis Foundation is named for two people who taught me about love and resilience in profoundly different ways. This is their legacy. And it's mine. The standing ovation lasted longer than my actual speech. Mrs. Thompson sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with tissue. Andrew stood beside her, his professional composure cracking into something resembling pride. Martin had driven down from the vineyard with his wife, both applauding enthusiastically. By our first week's end, we'd received 12 calls to our 24-hour hotline. By the first month's conclusion, we'd opened 3 elder abuse cases, obtained 1 restraining order, and helped reunite 2 families torn apart by financial exploitation. The local news ran a feature story, "Engineer Turns Personal Tragedy into Lifeline for Seniors." By November, 6 months after our launch, we'd helped 237 people. Every single one made those 13 days in the garage worth enduring. In late April, a letter had arrived at the vineyard, forwarded from my old address. Brielle's handwriting on the envelope neater than I remembered. "Dad, I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the 13 days you suffered because of me. But I'm trying to become someone who would never do that again. Treatment showed me I was sick, addicted, desperate, selfish. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm working to be better for me, not for you. If someday you're willing to talk, I'll be here. Brielle." I'd read it 3 times, then set it aside for a week before responding carefully. "Brielle, I received your letter. I'm glad you're getting help. I'm not ready to see you yet, but I haven't closed the door permanently. Keep working on yourself. Time will tell. Dad." By that November, I'd learned through Andrew that she was working as a barista, living modestly, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times weekly. 8 months without gambling. She sent occasional texts, "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," or "Saw the news about the foundation. I'm proud of you," that I answered with brief acknowledgments. It wasn't reconciliation, but it wasn't nothing either. Jason's path had been different. He'd found work as a construction foreman, using his engineering background practically. Every month since January, he'd sent me $500 voluntary restitution he insisted on making. I deposited every check into the foundation's account. In July, he'd called asking if he could visit the vineyard and volunteer at the foundation. I'd agreed cautiously. He'd spent a week building a wheelchair ramp for our office entrance and mentoring young men in our employment program. By November, we'd hired him part-time as a handyman for the foundation. We had coffee monthly now, not family, not exactly friends, but something respectful and honest. Marcus Reed had gone to trial in March. 3 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud, 1 count of elder abuse conspiracy. 7 years in federal prison, no parole eligibility for 5. I'd attended the sentencing but hadn't spoken. Justice had been served. I didn't think about him anymore. My days at the vineyard had fallen into a rhythm that felt exactly right. Mornings on the porch with coffee and my journal. Mid-mornings dedicated to foundation workboard meetings, case reviews, fundraising calls. Afternoons in the vineyard with Martin, who'd become something like the father figure I'd lost. We'd bottled our first vintage under my watch in early November, Hollis Ridge 2024 Cabernet Sauvignon. Martin had raised his glass solemnly. To Thomas, to Lillian, to second chances. I'd echoed the toast, and the wine had tasted like earth and patience, and something very close to home. People asked sometimes if I regretted those 13 days. The answer was complicated. I regretted that my daughter had become capable of such cruelty. I regretted wasting 15 years estranged from my father. But I didn't regret fighting back. I didn't regret protecting my father's legacy. And I didn't regret building something good from something painful. Lillian used to say, hurt people, but healed people heal people. I'd been hurt deeply fundamentally, but I'd chosen to heal. And in healing, I'd learned to help others do the same. On Thanksgiving evening, I stood on the porch watching cars pull up the gravel drive. Martin and his wife, Mrs. Thompson, who'd flown out from Denver, Andrew Sterling with expensive bourbon, Robert Fleming with stories and laughter. Jason invited tentatively, but welcomed warmly. We gathered around Thomas's table and I raised my glass of Hollis Ridge Cabernet. To those who loved me when I couldn't love myself. To those who believed in me when I'd lost faith. To Lillian and Thomas, may they rest, knowing their legacy lives on. And to second chances. Later, after everyone had departed, I stood alone on the porch with a final glass of wine, watching the sun set behind the peaks. I was 69 years old. I'd lost much, but gained more purpose, peace, and a family I'd chosen, rather than one I'd been born into. This wasn't the life I'd planned. But it was the life I'd earned through patience and strategy and the willingness to keep going when giving up would have been easier. I wouldn't trade this life for anything. When you reach the end of a story like this, I hope you pause for a moment and breathe with me. I don't share these final words as a victory lap, I share them as a confession. I waited too long. I told myself that staying quiet was the same as being loving, that holding on meant I was being faithful to my role as a father. That thinking nearly cost me my freedom. In stories shaped by family betrayal, silence often feels safer than truth, but it quietly feeds the damage. What began as one of those familiar grandpa stories turned into a lesson I never expected to learn this late in life. I believe the Lord gives warnings long before He allows consequences. I felt those warnings, and I ignored them. I chose comfort over clarity and peace over honesty. The Lord didn't abandon me. He waited for me to stop excusing what was hurting me. In that waiting, I learned that suffering can refine judgment without destroying compassion. And when everything finally stood on the edge, I placed the outcome in God, trusting that accountability can exist without hatred. So if you're listening to this, learn from my failure. Don't be like me. Don't rationalize family betrayal just because it comes from someone you love. Don't confuse patience with permission. Even the quietest grandpa stories carry a moment when a decision must be made. My view now is clear: forgiveness does not mean surrender, and kindness does not require self-erasure. I still believe the Lord values mercy, but He also values wisdom. I look back and see a man who endured instead of acted, who hoped things would change on their own. That was my mistake. Pain didn't make me stronger, action did. And if my experience helps even one person step away from family betrayal, then these words matter. If this story spoke to you, if you've lived through moments like these or seen yourself in these grandpa stories, please leave a comment and share your perspective. If you found something meaningful here, a share or a subscription helps this channel reach others who may need these lessons. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the very end. And a gentle notice before you continue: future stories may include fictionalized elements created for reflection and learning. If that isn't right for you, feel free to step away and choose content that better supports your journey.